If a room went quiet, I filled it. If a wound was open, I found the bandage. People called me easy to love, and for a long time, I believed that was the safest thing a person could be. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is the kitchen, small, yellow-tiled, always smelling of cardamom, where every Sunday for 6 years, I cooked for a family that wasn't legally mine yet, but felt like it. My fiancé, Adrian, his mother, who called me daughter before we'd even set a date, and his sister, Vienna, beautiful, sharp, the kind of charming that made you forget to ask questions. I loved her. That's important to say, because it makes everything after this harder to forgive. Not because she did something cruel, but because I handed her the exact map she needed to be cruel with precision. Vienna used to say, "We take care of our own, don't we?" She said it so often it stopped sounding like a question. I should tell you about the years before the wedding, because none of what happened later makes sense without them. When I first met Adrian, I was 26, freshly out of a relationship that had left me smaller than I used to be. He was patient in a way I hadn't known men could be. He introduced me to his family, slowly, carefully, like he was handing me something fragile and wanted to make sure I'd be held properly. His mother, Delphine, hugged me the first night we met and never really let go after that, in the best way. And Vienna took one look at me across that first dinner table and said, "Finally, someone who can keep up with us," like I'd passed some invisible test I didn't know I was taking. For the first 2 years, she was the sister I never had. She taught me how her mother liked her coffee. She warned me which uncle to avoid at holidays and why. She sat with me in hospital waiting rooms when my own father got sick, holding my hand without saying anything, because she somehow knew that was what I needed. I want you to hold on to that image, because it's real. It happened. My trust in her wasn't naive. It was earned, slowly, deliberately over years, which is exactly what made it so useful to her later. The wedding was 11 weeks away when the first crack appeared. I'd taken on extra freelance work to help cover the deposit on the venue, a converted greenhouse outside the city, glass ceiling, string lights, the kind of place you save pictures of for years before you can afford it. Adrian and I split everything. That was our rule. Equal partners, equal risk. We'd built our whole relationship on that principle, and it had never failed us. The first sign was small enough to miss. Adrian mentioned, almost offhand, over dinner one night, that Vienna had helped simplify things with the venue contract. She knew the owner personally, he said, could get us a better rate if the deposit went through her business account first, then she'd forward it along. It made sense at the time. She ran an events company. Vendors trusted her. It was generous even, that she'd offer to handle the logistics herself when she was already so busy. There was a single receipt, folded in my coat pocket, for the exact deposit amount, $4,200, with Vienna's company letterhead at the top. I kept it, because it felt like proof that everything was being done properly. I taped it inside my recipe notebook, the one I used every Sunday, so I'd always know where it was. I didn't know yet that proof and protection are not the same thing. 3 weeks later, the venue called me directly. Not Vienna, me. They said the deposit had never been received, and that if it wasn't resolved within 5 business days, we'd lose the date entirely. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone against my ear, staring at that receipt taped inside my recipe notebook, and feeling the floor tilt slightly under something that hadn't happened yet, but was already true. I didn't accuse her. I want to be honest about that, because it matters later. I gave her every chance to be innocent. I called her that same evening, careful, gentle, the way you'd ask a question you already dreaded the answer to. She sounded stricken, genuinely stricken. She said there must have been a bank error on the venue's end, something about a merchant account glitch, and promised to chase it up first thing tomorrow. Adrian believed her instantly. Why wouldn't he? She was his sister. She'd never given him a reason not to. And honestly, neither had she given me one. Not until that moment. Here's what nobody tells you about being the easy one, the fixer, the girl everyone calls. A sweetheart. It means when something goes wrong, you are always the last person anyone suspects, including yourself. I spent that entire week quietly wondering what I'd done wrong. Had I sent the wrong account number? Had I misread an email? I went back through my own bank statements 4 times looking for my own mistake before it ever occurred to me to look for someone else's. The second crack came at Delphine's birthday dinner, 2 weeks later. The whole family was there, china out, candles lit, the kind of evening that photographs beautifully. Vienna made a toast, warm, funny, the kind that makes a room lean toward her. She talked about her mother's strength, about family showing up for each other. And near the end, almost as an aside, almost too quiet to catch, she said, "And of course, we've all been so patient helping get the wedding finances sorted. Some people just aren't as organised as others, and that's okay. That's what family's for." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It took me 11 seconds, I counted them later, replaying it in my head that night, unable to sleep, to understand she had just told an entire room of people, gently, sweetly, over dessert, that I was the reason the money had gone missing. Not directly. Never directly. That was never her style. She built her cruelty out of implication, the same way she built her charm, soft-edged, deniable, impossible to point to without sounding paranoid. We take care of our own, don't we? I finally understood what she meant. She wasn't talking about me. She had never been talking about me. Every kindness, every private joke, every hand on my shoulder at family dinners, every hour in that hospital waiting room. I'm not saying none of it was real. I still don't fully know how much of it was real, but I understood that night that whatever it was, it had also doubled as reconnaissance. She'd been studying exactly how much I would absorb before I pushed back. The answer, for 6 years, had been everything. I want to tell you I confronted her that night, dramatic and righteous, the room going silent, everyone finally seeing her clearly. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter and slower, and I think far more effective, though it took every ounce of restraint I had. I went home that night and didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the recipe notebook open in front of me, that folded receipt smoothed flat under the lamplight. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to give her a single moment she could later describe as me overreacting, because I already knew, somewhere in my bones, that whatever story got told about this would matter as much as whatever actually happened the next morning. I called the venue myself and asked for a full itemized transaction history tied to our deposit account, every attempted transfer, every timestamp, everything. Then I called my own bank and requested the original transfer confirmation, the one I'd sent to Vienna's business account, timestamped, with a reference number attached. It took 4 days for both documents to arrive. I didn't say a word to anyone in the family during that time. I just kept cooking Sunday dinners like nothing had changed, smiling at Vienna across the same table, learning, I suppose, from the very method she'd used on me. When both documents finally arrived, I did the one thing she hadn't planned for. I didn't post anything. I didn't call a family meeting. I asked Adrian to sit with me at our kitchen table and look at both documents side by side in silence, before either of us said a single word about his sister. 2 documents on a kitchen table. Mine, showing the transfer leaving my account on March 14th, clean, time-stamped, verified. Hers, showing no matching deposit ever entering the venue's account, but showing, 3 days later, an outgoing transfer of the exact same amount, $4,200, to an account under Vienna's own name, at a completely different bank. Adrian didn't yell. I remember being surprised by that. He just went very still, the way people do when a flaw they've stood on their whole life quietly gives way beneath them. He read the documents twice, then a third time. Then he asked me very quietly if I was sure. I told him I hadn't drawn a single conclusion. The numbers had. All I'd done was ask questions and wait for answers that couldn't lie the way people could. I didn't ask him for an apology on her behalf. Apologies can be performed, rehearsed, delivered with just the right amount of tears to make everyone move on quickly. I asked for something Vienna couldn't fake. I asked Adrian to send the 2 documents to his mother himself, without commentary, without accusation, and let her draw her own conclusion in her own time. I've learned that people believe evidence far more completely than they believe accusations, especially when the accusation comes from someone they've spent years quietly deciding was too sensitive or too dramatic to be fully trusted. Delphine called me 3 days later. Not Adrian. Me. She didn't apologize in so many words. She simply asked me to come over, alone, and when I got there, she'd made tea the way I liked it, which she'd never once done in 6 years. She said, "I should have looked closer, sooner," and then she didn't say anything else about it for a long time. We just sat there, 2 women who'd both been managed by the same person in different ways, understanding each other for the first time. Vienna returned the money in full within 9 days of Adrian receiving those documents. Not because she was caught by me. I never once raised my voice at her, never confronted her directly at all, never gave her a scene she could later reframe as my hysteria, but because the paperwork made the lie impossible to keep standing upright. She'd built her entire plan around my silence, around the version of me who checked her own bank statements 4 times before ever suspecting someone else. She hadn't planned for the version of me who simply asked for documentation and let it speak. The family dynamic shifted in small ways after that, the way ice shifts before it finally cracks all the way through. Vienna still came to dinners. She still smiled. But something in the room had recalibrated. People watched her a half-second longer before laughing at her jokes now. Small correction, but permanent. At the rehearsal dinner, 6 weeks later, Vienna gave no toast. She sat near the end of the table, and for the first time in 6 years, the room didn't lean toward her when she spoke. Delphine sat beside me instead, closer than she ever had before, and at one point during dessert, with everyone else laughing at something across the table, she leaned over and said only one sentence all night. I should have looked closer, sooner. I think she needed to say it twice. Once wasn't enough to make it feel real. People ask me sometimes if I forgave Vienna. I tell them forgiveness was never really the question I was trying to answer. I didn't need her to feel sorry. Sorry is cheap, and she was good at producing it on demand. I needed the truth to exist somewhere outside of my own memory, in a form no one could quietly edit later, in a form that didn't depend on anyone believing me over her. Once that truth existed on paper, verified, time-stamped, undeniable, I found I didn't actually need anything else from her at all. Not an apology, not a scene, not even her discomfort. Just the record. Adrian and I got married in that greenhouse, glass ceiling, string lights, exactly as we'd planned before any of this started. Vienna came. She sat in the 3rd row. She didn't give a toast that day either, and nobody asked her to. We take care of our own, don't we? She used to say it like a promise, warm and inclusive, the kind of thing that made you feel chosen. By the end, I understood it had never been a promise at all. It was a warning, dressed up as affection, and I simply hadn't been the one it was meant to protect.